And that's from your constituency?
Yes.
Oh, really?
Special greetings to Uncle Kwampieni.
Right. But he's been talking a lot. You don't seem to be listening to him.
I listen to him a lot. We speak privately more.
Okay. All right.
I listen to him.
So as you listen to him,
Yes.
he's even going beyond these flagship programs
Yes.
that are up for review. We don't even know what the nature of the review is. As far as he's concerned, he won't touch the education, benefits.
Yes.
Right. But he wants it to even be over, reaching. It should go far.
Yes.
To questions of ex gratia, questions of the size of government and government spending, and so on. Now tell us, what is the nature of this review that government is now talking about?
Thank you. And let me also commend Uncle Kwampieni. Today he spoke in defense of the values of the party that we all belong to, freedom, development in freedom, and emphasize on the need for the human capital development to be key. And that is why free education and all the flagship that we speak about is central and very critical for the future prosperity and growth of our country. And I'm on all fours with him. And I also agreed with him when he talked about President Akufo-Addo's position on election at the district level, because if you don't reduce the units of growth and development to the basic level and you centralize all at the center, you don't achieve the impact the way it's supposed to be. So eventually, I think we should bring back that discussion and look at how we better decentralize political and development growth of the country to the district level. I agree with him entirely on that.
To the district level.
To the district level.
When he mentioned that, it got me referring to Bernard Avle, who says, when you win party, your best hands should be going to the district.
Yes, that means that we have to...
You all look up to the president to appoint you to be ministers rather than to serve at the district level.
But have you questioned why it is so? The reason is incentive. So if you can direct incentive to the district level, you get the best talent there. So once it will come with a policy, once we agree to look at that direction, if you direct incentives, everybody will go there. So I believe that is the key issue.
Okay. So let's get to the flagship.
Now the flagship, yes, but I'll get to the flagship discussion. I just want to give a brief on this IMF thing, and briefly, then we'll get to the flagship. Because we went to the IMF with a program, and His Excellency Nana Akufo-Addo's cabinet approved the PCPEG program, which was the basis or the foundation for the IMF program which was approved. The PCPEG is the post-COVID-19 program for economic growth. So basically, that is what it's about when we say PCPEG. And that was the program which served as the foundation for why we achieved the staff level agreement and the board approval. And basically, what is it about? It is, let me say, it's a large and front-loaded fiscal consolidation program, which means that, of course, to ensure we achieve sustainable growth and bring back the economy onto sustainable path, whilst also ensuring that we protect the vulnerable in society. So if you look at the disbursement, we are now going to have 600 million every first 6 months, another 600 million 6 months. Before the rest is spread, 360 million for the rest of the period within the 3 years. So it's front-loaded. And within the PCPEG, we need to achieve certain thresholds or certain objectives. One of the key objectives is restoring public debt sustainability. So, and I'm sure the discussion about this flagship will be anchored on sustaining public debt sustainability. You see, one of the key problems we have had as an economy, especially when the IMF talked about pre-existing fiscal and debt vulnerability, not just even Ukraine and COVID-19, was the fact that if you looked at the component or the composition of our revenues into our debt repayment, it was becoming unsustainable, or it was unsustainable. And you see, every country's debt position became unsustainable because it was exacerbated by COVID-19. Today, as we speak, you know there's a huge deadlock in America over whether to extend the debt ceiling of the country, because the $35 trillion ceiling of the country is reached. And unless the Congress of America extends it, the ceiling to maybe 40 or 45 trillion, American government cannot borrow. And so by 3rd June, which is some few days away, if American Congress is not able to settle that debate, America will run into default of its debt. Why have they gotten there? In the last few years from 2020 when COVID struck, America has printed over $15 trillion to shore up the economy. And it's not only America. Ghana went through the same situation. We had revenue shortfalls in COVID and did extra expenditures unbudgeted for, and we had to resort to extra borrowings in order to sustain the economy. It's not only Ghana or America's situation. Every economy in the world went through that phase, and that is where we are. And that is what led us to where we are. And
I don't want to engage you. I don't want to engage you on that debate where you shift the entire blame to COVID and Russia, Ukraine, and you conveniently forget your role as a government, how competently or otherwise you manage the economy and got us to where we are.
You know, in my discussion, I use the word pre-existing, agreeing with IMF that beyond COVID and the Ukraine war, they were pre-existing, but they said what? Fiscal and debt vulnerability. If you are vulnerable, you can still be okay. And many nations were okay. But when the external shocks came, you didn't have buffers. Okay, so we are not saying that we didn't have issues, but it got exacerbated by the COVID and the external shocks. That's the point we have been making. So what I'm saying is that in order to overcome all these difficulties, we have gone with this PCPEG to also not just receive money, but to do structural reforms. Okay, we intend to have reforms, tax policy reforms, revenue administration changes, like we just announced about the property rate going digital, and of course the public financial management system.
Earlier you had those 3 taxes that Kwame Pianin said the president should not assent, and he went ahead to assent. Meanwhile, you say you listen to him.
Well, but of course you don't expect us to agree with everything he said.
I hear you.
We agree on a number of things. And of course, you see, I would rather, so we'll go into the expenditure issues and see whether the discussions on the flagship is just sentimental rather than dealing with the main issues. In this PCPEC, we also want to focus on certain structural deficiencies in the economy. For instance, the cocoa sector. The amount of expenditure inefficiencies in the cocoa sector have to be addressed. The energy sector, the IPP commitments and regular payments you need to do to sustain the electricity to be on. Some efficiencies have to be improved. You are talking about ECG and its recovery problems. You are talking about Volta, Gridco, and all the rest. If we are able to address those inefficiencies in the expenditure side, you realize that even the debate about the flagship programs becomes even moot. Okay.
But you didn't have to wait for the IMF to stand over your shoulders with cane like a teacher before you do this.
But you see, this is where we always disagree. On your own website, My Joy Online, if you go to March 23rd, it was published that government itself announced to review the flagship programs. March 23rd, March 20.
I have all the date lines here.
Yeah, okay, so you have it.
I'm going to deal with you
okay, so
at a certain point.
Yes, I want to get a specific date.
And when you were rejecting even proposals by others in that regard, and yet you were at various times making
so 21st March 2022 on My Joy Online.
Right.
All government flagships to be reviewed. This is after we went for this 3-day cabinet retreat at Peduase. So government itself have been doing this self-assessment. And don't forget that the PCPEG program that was submitted to the IMF for the program was submitted by government of Ghana. It is our program which was accepted by the fund. So it is not the IMF holding any cane on government. It's just sentimental. But you see, now let's go into the discussions of why we should review expenditures and why I'm saying, and why the point I'm making about these flagship programs being sentimental discussions.
Okay, so why I was also, you get the why I was also waiting until we get here, before I point you to these datelines.
Okay, sure.
Is that if you, in fact, were doing these reviews as far back as then, why are we still at it?
Okay.
Where are we?
Yeah, we are at it because they are not the major problems. And I want to point you to the major problems.
Okay.
Good. So the total expenditure of Ghana, I mean, if you look at the appropriation budget for 2023, we are talking about 190 billion Ghana cedis. Okay. In that component, 56 billion of it is going into debt repayment. 56 billion. In that appropriation, about 45 billion is going into compensation and wages. Okay. And then you are talking about 35 billion in statutory payment obligations, common fund, get fund, and all the statutory requirements. Goods and services is just about 16 billion. Now, the flagship program that many people have focused on is the free SHS. The budget in 2023 for free SHS was 2.9 billion Ghana cedis. So if you are going to spend nearly 200 billion in Ghana, okay, and you are spending 2.8 billion of it to educate 1.3 million of the population, what is big deal about it? This is the reason why you don't get attention. Where the elephant in the room is your debt obligations, which is what we have taken steps under the IMF to do domestic debt restructuring. We are doing external debt restructuring to bring these obligations within sustainable levels.
From 2019 to date, when this debate has been ongoing, cumulatively, free SHS has consumed 11.34 billion. That's the budget allocation for this flagship.
And what is your cumulative expenditure in that period? Before you go on.
Planting for food and jobs has taken 2.49 billion. One district, one factory, 823.3 million. School feeding program, 3 billion. Livelihood empowerment against poverty, 1.16 billion. And water and sanitation initiative, 354.5 million.
Yes, these are insignificant compared to your total expenditures over the 5 years. So I'm saying compare. Your problem is not these flagship programs. The elephant in the room are the 3 top expenditure items,
compensation,
which are rigid. Compensation,
debt
obligations, and your statutory payments.
Okay.
This is where, as a nation, you must look at. And then even the SOEs. There's huge contingent liabilities on government from the SOEs on the part of cocoa bills. You are talking about the energy sector. We just discussed the energy sector. If you are able to address these contingent liabilities and the big ticket items, you don't need to worry your head about 2 billion.
The SOEs, the state enterprises, they've been making losses.
Yes, that's the point I'm making. Yes. So you need to look at your public administration of the SOEs. And now, as part of the IMF program, all SOEs must operate on the giftness. So you need to bring expenditure rationalization and efficiency in the public administration of these SOEs. You have to now pay attention to the energy sector bills. How do you reduce it? How do you ensure efficiency and recovery, especially with the ECG? And let me commend my good brother, Lawyer Dubik Mahama, for the good job he's doing at the ECG and all that, and the other thing. This is where government must look at. When we are talking about reforms and efficiency, it's not the 2 billion educating 1.3 million Ghanaians, like Mr. Kwampieni said. We must even add on to that. But our focus must be, how do we reduce the waste in public expenditure?
The question of targeting that came up with the free SHS is something that even the finance minister initially was for. That there are people who can afford. Why don't you identify those who can't and make savings for something else?
Can I use myself?
Or make savings to improve the same system?
Let me use my history. I met you in Legon. But before Legon, I was born in Sankore. My parents, both my mother and my father, they are alive. They are cocoa farmers. My father was also a purchasing clerk in Sankore, in a village in Sankore. When I went to Opokuare, I never got access to cocoa scholarship. My friends from Accra, contractors' children, came with cocoa scholarship in Opokuare. So I always say that if the moment you say the poor must not pay and the rich must pay, in Ghana, it will be the rich children who know the ministers and the education directors who will enjoy it.
You just ensure you have efficiency.
Where is that efficiency coming from? Why didn't you ensure it when I was in the village? So I am a typical example of how a poor farmer or a poor boy in Sankwari village can rise to become a minister if access to education is provided. Then President Akufo-Addo said, whether you are a rich child or poor child, looking at the budget and the sacrifice and the benefits, let's allow every child, whether he's from poor home or rich home, education is a leveler of social mobility.
But if that does not allow you to produce quality,
but
are you really giving them
evidence
education?
Has shown that we are, in fact, in the last WASI report, Ghana topped the whole West Africa in terms of quality of performance. So what are we talking about evidence here? This is not the issue. I am saying that the cost, the discussion, the sentimental discussion on flagship program is neither here nor there, because those are not the issues. If we really want to deal with the issues of expenditure rationalization, forget about flagship programs. How much are they? Look at the years, even you combined 5 years, combined the total expenditure of Ghana in that 5 years, you are running into trillions. How much is tens of billions to ensure that you are making social impact on your people? Okay. So that is not the point. So the elephant in the room, like I said, and that is what the IMF program is seeking to address, weaknesses in our public administration, in SOEs, the cocoa sector, several contingent liabilities in the energy sector. If we are able to address those problems, ex-gratia, look, arguments about ex-gratia, another sentimental matter. You get it? Because even yesterday, if you listen to the Chief Justice, she says that the judiciary doesn't receive ex-gratia because it is what they are entitled.
I'm sure normally people's attention is actually not on the judiciary.
Okay,
and
it's
those
rather
who have
on the
gone
politicians.
Away, it's the politicians who try to equalize.
Yes, but
who try to get support and sympathy when the matter comes up, and then they say even the judiciary, is also receiving.
But Leonard, you know it is one article that is providing this incentive to everybody. And it is a matter of working back what you are entitled to. Why do we call it? Maybe we just have to change the name. Because even the Bible says that the laborer is worth his wages. So let's be fair about some of these discussions. And I refer to it because of its percentage vis-a-vis your total expenditures. It's in what? Millions, maybe hundreds of millions, not billions of cedis compared to the billions that you are spending. So those are not the issues why we are struggling as a nation. Let's deal with the issues that will resolve our problems.
You mentioned compensation.
Yes,
that is part of compensation.
So let's deal with
if you want to deal with compensation.
So what's the component of that in the compensation budget? The last year was 250 million Ghana cedis. The entire compensation budget is 45 billion we are talking about. So I am not saying it's not important discussion, but I'm saying that let's deal with the ghost names, let's deal with the things that drag and are repetitive, the inefficiencies that create waste is where we must all focus so that we bring down the burden. If you latch on to sentimental issues, you are always going to go back to the problem.
Okay, hold on there. You're still here on Newsfile. This is your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, as always, we put Ghana first.